Well, I'd like to welcome all of the participants. I see that we have around 300, right at 300 right now, and we do really appreciate you are being with us this morning. Before we get into the program, I just have a couple comments about the process that we're involved in. And a very important part of the process is sharing information with you as we have it, and to gather information, feedback, concerns from you. And so the Classroom to Cloud planning team, consisting of the cabinet members you see on the screen, all of the teaching and learning team, all of the principals and assistant principals, and several teachers have been working tirelessly on our plan. As you know, we've made some adjustments just within the last week, and some as late as yesterday, and we're wanting to share those with you. At this time, I think it's important just to get into the meat of the program, and I can introduce on the next slide all of the panelists that we have. And so at this point, if we could go to the next slide.
Are you seeing the next slide? Yes. Okay. Oh, I think Dr. Hill froze.
There we go. There we go. So today's panelists, by the way, I'm just letting you know, it shows on my screen I have unstable internet connection. So if I go in and out, they'll just take over for me. I'm not sure what's going on. So the panelists this morning, we have Kyle Anderson. He's Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. Deanna Barish, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. Catherine Law, she's our K-12 Assessment, Instruction, Technology, and Social Studies Coordinator. Amy Quinn is our K-12 Math Science Coordinator and our Advanced Programming Coordinator. We have Gianna Taylor, K-12 ELA, MTSS, and School Improvement Coordinator. Eric Whitney, Assistant Superintendent of Talent Development and Management. And not with us this morning, but joining us for the parent information sessions will be Joey Spano, Director of Community Education, and Laura Poxon, Early Childhood Education Coordinator. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Deanna, and she's going to walk through the informational program with you. Just as a last comment, I thank each of you for your tireless dedication that you've shown all spring. I know you're working and thinking a lot about what's happening in the fall. And please know that we have the safety of students and staff at our utmost priority. And as we go through this, those are the kind of feedback that we would like to have. What's on your mind, and how can we make this work for you and for the students that we serve? Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. I also want to make sure we didn't add her to the slide, but we want to make sure that she gets recognized as well. We are also fortunate to have Kim Abel on with us as a panelist today. You know, we have done a lot of work together in collaboration with the WBEA, and we appreciate Kim's ongoing support, serving as a voice for our teachers across the district, and certainly Cindy Austin, our UniServe rep, who also serves as a voice for our paragroup, our secretaries, and our other employees from K through 12, pre-K through 26. So thank you, Kim, for joining us today, and thanks for continuing to be a good partner to us as we move through these really uncharted waters. So we want to get into the conversation, as Dr. Hill referenced, that we made some changes, as you know, late in the day, and we want to talk a little bit about the genesis of those changes as soon as I get my slides to move. And we're going to spend a little less time on instruction today, simply because you will have the opportunity to interact with your building leaders and also with the teaching and learning team, and Eric and Kyle, Dr. Hill, and myself, and Kim, whenever you need around the instructional component. So we're just going to kind of talk very briefly about those pieces with all of you this morning. We'll spend more time with that with our parents later today. But we really want to have an opportunity to talk about the safety and health concerns that you might have and some of the protocols that we've put into place. So last evening, we shared that the K-8 model will be a 4-day half-day rotation. So I guess you could think a little bit about the old days of half-day kindergarten. So half the school in the morning for a session, a break in the middle of the day, and then the other half of the school in the afternoon for a session. It provides 4 days of continuity of learning for our students in grades K through 8. The high school will remain online until we move into phase 5, and OEC will continue in their blended format, the 2 days on, 3 days of remote learning, because they've already scheduled their college courses and it works well for them. So we really are trying to be responsive to the needs of our community. Maybe contrary to what we're seeing on social media this morning, simply because this is a shift, a pivot from where we were just a few days ago, but we really feel like these are some sound reasoning for doing these things. So we want to talk a little bit about why we made the change to really begin to think about having students in person 4 days a week rather than just 2. And I think this is an appropriate quote where it says, "Be clear about your goal, but flexible about the process of achieving it." We know that our goal is to provide the best instructional opportunities for our students and in the safest manner possible during the pandemic. And so how we get to that, how we reach that goal may indeed change over the course of time. What we're telling you today could certainly be impacted if we move back to phase 3, which would mean completely remote learning. It could also change if we suddenly move to phase 5 and we return to 5 days of in-person instruction. Our goal is always the same: high level, highly effective instruction for our students as safely as we possibly can during this pandemic, and for our staff as well. So that's our goal. How we get there may indeed change across the path. So when we began to consider what K-5 or K-8 would look like, and we know that being able to have kids in front of us more is important. Really, our success of cloud learning, based largely upon all your hard work this spring, was because we had established relationships with students. And we recognized that in the 2-day model, those relationships would be harder to establish. And quite frankly, those routines and that consistency of school would be tougher to establish. So the success really was based because we already had long-standing relationships with our students, and they with you, and therefore they wanted to engage in remote learning. So we know that was certainly a factor. We also looked at consistency of instruction. It allows for us to have students in front of us 4 times a week, that it builds students back into that routine of returning to school. We hope eventually that we're able to get back to 5 days of in-person instruction, and that by having those 4 days, that students will be get back into that, really thinking about school mode, following a schedule and a structure. We felt that was very important. The remote learning responsibilities are reduced, both on your part as a teacher in many ways, because the instruction will change and what we will be asking to have in Canvas will change. And certainly that load will be reduced for our families. We got a lot of feedback, and if you obviously look at Facebook and you see any of those memes about, oh, it's so hard to be a teacher when it's your own child, and I don't know how they can possibly do it. We want to reduce that load for parents so that they're getting the bulk of their instruction, especially that core instruction, when they're in front of us each and every day. So that's really also important. The flexibility to provide services and supports. So one thing that we know is that we had students who had special needs, whether those were students with special needs, whether those were 504s, whether that was English language learners, or students that simply were in our tier 2 or tier 3 intervention models, who are going to have even greater gaps than when they left us in March. This provides the opportunity to provide some additional support for students because potentially we can have students stay in that afternoon, work with interventionists, work with resource room teachers, work with other ancillary support staff in order to make sure that those gaps don't continue to widen. So it allows for that flexibility. We know that an ongoing concern, and then I know that Kyle and Eric are going to address quite a bit today, is that safety component. And so by going into this 4-day model with half days, it negates the need to navigate lunch in the traditional sense and or to have students eating in the same way in the classrooms. It negates recess because there won't be time for recess. They would just come for instruction in either the morning or the afternoon. And then also passing times at the middle school so that we won't have large groups of bodies of students moving at any one time. So we felt that was very important, and it really could help to ensure or reduce the risk of exposure for both staff and students. The shorter blocks of time are significantly more manageable for both elementary students and middle school students. When we began to consider a full 2 days of middle school students, as required by the governor's order, wearing a mask all day long and staying in the same location all day long, we realized that that was going to be a big ask on both the part of the staff and the students. The shorter blocks of time will allow for students to be able to take their masks off when they go home, have a break so they can go back and do remote learning, to get out of that classroom setting for the entire day, and also for us to be able to provide very intentional, intense instruction. We are going to be able to offer cloud care. As you know, we've had previewed earlier in the spring the ability to offer child care. And at that point in time, we were considering at OMS because that was the building that had the most availability. This allows us to offer cloud care in their home schools. So that also reduces the risk of exposure because they will maintain their home school. They won't leave Gretschko, they won't leave Scotch, they won't leave the middle schools for any sort of cloud care. And so they're able to stay within their home school and not have to have that additional transition and exposure to other kids. It's consistent, K-8. When we began to look at this model, we talked about why it worked well at middle school and the advantages, and recognized that we needed to be able to do that consistently, K-8, for our families so that they could plan accordingly. They knew what those schedules were. They could have siblings that got each other off the bus or put each other on the bus, or they could adjust their work schedules accordingly. So we wanted that consistency. It also maintains Wednesday as our deep cleaning day. Also for you as staff members, is going to allow you to have your staff meetings, your PLC meetings, and then time, a significant amount of time to create and then upload your remote learning lessons into Canvas. And so we recognize that there's an additional load here when you're teaching all day and then also maintaining remote learning. And so that time will be given to you on Wednesdays to be able to get those remote learning lessons created as a PLC or individually and uploaded into Canvas as well. It also allows us to get in and do deep cleaning in the building, which we think it will be very important. So those are kind of the reasons why, those things when we talk with parents today, when we talk with community members, that really led us to make this kind of pivot from what we had originally messaged to our families about the 2 days of live instruction, 3 days at home, to be able to provide more consistency. So those are kind of those high level talking points that we'll be able to share with both our families. As you look at this, and this is the same slide that we showed to you earlier in the school year, in the spring, about all the considerations that we had for returning to school in the fall. As you can see, it's not one-sided. There's not one angle that we have to look at. I'm not just worried about instructional priorities. We're not just worried about stakeholder communication. All of these things have to be considered into those factors. And not unlike you, who have spent hours worrying about this, rethinking your lessons, deciding what it is that you want to do, whether you want to come back to in-person instruction, whether you want to consider Lakers Online as a teacher, we have to consider all of these things as well. And it is certainly a huge kudos to the teaching and learning team, our cabinet team, our board of education, and all of you, our building leaders, who are spending a significant amount of time making sure that we address each individual's part of this so that we haven't left really any stone unturned. We can't answer every question because this continues to evolve, but we're doing our very best to stay on top of it and keep you informed along the way. So today you're going to hear about a number of these factors that we're considering and how they'll impact you when we return to school in the fall. So you can remember, if you remember, this is kind of our roadmap that we had talked about. So Plan A is our blended model, which we've adjusted. Plan B is our remote stay-at-home order, which would be phase 3, phases 1 through 3. Phase A, Plan A is phase 4. Plan B is if we're in phases 1 through 3 of the governor's order. And then obviously remote learning only as an option is Lakers Online. So while perhaps the delivery of K-8 has changed, or perhaps the delivery of high school has changed, our roadmap really has not. We have just simply adjusted based upon the information that we had. You know what you saw in the email or the update last night that we will do is have students in cohort A who will attend instruction Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in the morning, remote learning in the afternoon for our K-8 students. Students in cohort B will attend remotely in the morning and then come for in-person instruction those same afternoons. All students across the district will be in remote learning on Wednesdays to allow for deep cleaning and sanitizing in our schools. And we certainly have OEC who's operating on their blended model, and the high school who will maintain online until we move to phase 5. We obviously have talked a lot about Lakers Online. You received a survey over the weekend that closes on Friday about your interest. And I had a question yesterday that I want to be able to address today. It was, It was, is this a commitment to teaching in Lakers Online? If I complete the form and say that I want to teach in Lakers Online, is that a commitment? And the answer is yes. We need to be able to get to staff Lakers Online in the coming week. And so we'll be working with Kim and with Cindy and Eric and myself to staff Lakers Online so that we're able to begin to do some additional professional development and get that program ready and up and running by August the 26th. So when you complete that form, you're making the commitment that you're ready to do Lakers Online. And so we wanted to make sure that we're clear about that today as well. We want to give a huge thanks to Dan Durkin, who is manning all of our social media, who's answering the many questions that are coming in today, particularly around the model. He put together this one-page document that we will be sending to our families and to all of you today. Literally, it looks great. That talks about, in just a simple, easy format, what it means for each of the phases instructionally, and then linking our return to learn roadmap. So parents and staff could go in at any time and learn a little bit more about what our safety and health protocols are going to be. And so it looks great. We're excited to be able to share that one-page document with everyone today. We refined it yesterday, and so we'll get that out to you as well. So that will be kind of your resource and your talking points when parents in the community ask, or if you're in other communities and they say, what does this look like? What's it mean for West Bloomfield? This is our really one-page go-to for our roadmap. Just briefly, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Quinn, who's going to talk a little bit about the bell times, just so that you can see these and what it means.
So here we have a schedule of the updated bell times, and you'll see we have AM start time and then AM dismissal, and then it would be 90 minutes in between, and then we have a PM start time and a PM dismissal. So each cohort would receive 2 hours and 40 minutes of instructional time, and then it would be 90 minutes in between. I'm going to talk briefly about some of the instructional models that we've been talking about, knowing that teaching and learning and admin will be supporting our teams in the buildings. But really looking at that in-person schedule, that is really the time for essential learning. That's the time when you're going to be doing things for K-5, such as small groups, guided reading, your mini lessons. Whereas the remote schedule, that would be more the time they're kind of preparing or getting ready for when they're in class with you. So we just have, kind of a schedule made up. And again, we're going to be working close with each school's C2C team to work out details on that. Looking at the instructional model for middle school, it would be about 40 minutes of, ELA, the core classes, science, math, history. And then during the remote time, that would be the time for your 2 electives.
We're working with this week with the high school administrative team, the department chairs and their C2C teams to really develop that instructional model that will work for online learning at the high school. One thing that we've heard, and I'm sure that you would agree as high school staff who are listening today, is that when the governor said in her order that attendance didn't really count and that students were going to earn credit regardless of their performance, that really probably didn't do us any favors with high school students and continuing to motivate them to complete their work. And so there's a little bit of that feeling among our community that there was a lack of rigor in some cases or expectations for high school students. And we know it was not because of your wanting them to participate and to learn, but that quite frankly, when that order really tended to kind of undermine what we were trying to do. We will be increasing the rigor and expectations for students. There will be assessment. There will be accountability when students don't log in. So we'll be working with the high school team. Actually, have a meeting tomorrow to really establish what that instructional time will look like for high school students, what that schedule will be, what their expectations will be, so we can share that with staff. We have a parent webinar for high school families only next Tuesday at 7 p.m. because we like webinars. And so we decided, well, what's one more? And so this will be an opportunity for our high school parents to be able to hear what our plans are as well, and students, so that they know what to expect as we continue in online learning at WBHS. This is our Lakers Online instructional model, and I'm just going to talk very, very, very briefly about this. So this is fluid. Once we've identified who the teachers are that will be teaching K-12 and Lakers Online, we'll work with them to really kind of establish that instructional model that we want to use. Those are really thinking about what we would expect students to do, the amount of time that they should commit to Lakers Online. It will be a rigorous program. It will be a typical school day expectation. And so we want to show that as well. But most importantly, we want you to know that the in-district application for Lakers Online closes on July 27th, and that for schools of choice, the deadline is August the 3rd. You might ask, why is the district pushing so quickly? We pivoted on our model. We got the information out very quickly. We are continuing to have webinars weekly. You're getting updates. It really is because of this sort of self-imposed July 27th deadline so that we can staff for Lakers Online, and also so parents have made that commitment. We are literally at the end of this week, 1 month from the start of the school year. And so we have a significant amount of work to do in a very short period of time. And so that's why there continues to be this very much a push to get things taken care of and done, and to make sure that you're in the loop every step of the way so there are no surprises. I'm sure that you know in neighboring districts that they have not quite had the level of communication that we have. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword sometimes, because sometimes what happens with that is that then you get a lot of feedback when you have a lot of communication. But we don't want you to feel, or our families to feel, that they don't know what's happening. And so that's why we continue to have webinars and to push these updates out to each of you. We've talked a little bit about the OEC model, so you can see that this is what they're going to continue to do as well. Here's our early childhood plan, just for our early childhood staff who may want to weigh in on this. This is really looking at stepping stones, when they're going to be offered, what's going to happen at ACS, what's happening at Scotch, what's happening at Chico, what's happening at Gretschko, and the fact that they also will have virtual learning options. We have early childhood families who also don't feel comfortable sending their kids back to school. So we want to make sure that we did that as well. So just briefly, when you get questions about cloud care, elementary families, middle school families, registration is going to open for cloud care in the next week. And so Joey and Laura will talk more about that with families today. But it will be offered at their home schools rather than having to travel to a different location and potentially be exposed to other students. Kids Club will continue in the AM and PM just as it would normally. So this will be extended care options for those families who need those things. They will be in cloud care. AM and PM is the time your child will not be in the classroom for in-person instruction. So again, think about what the old days of half-day kindergarten. So you might go in the morning and you had to stay for childcare in the afternoon because mom and dad went to work. Really is the very similar model. Traditional Kids Club, we could potentially have students that get dropped off at 6:45 and they remain in school until 6:30. So we are providing flexible options for everybody. If you can see that what we're able to do is that it's approximately $15 per session for families. That's lunch, that's probably a snack, that is additionally just, and that's a half day of care. That's a bargain, I will tell you right now. We are looking simply to break even. We are not looking there. We will not be making money on our cloud care. We are simply looking to provide an option for parents who need to have that working option for people who are going back to some childcare. So that's really what that's going to look like. And they are going to have opportunities too. They will have some free time. They will be housed in a separate location within the building, so they won't be traveling when your students are out or those sorts of things. They'll have their own locations. They'll have some enrichment. They're going to have lunch, and they're going to have opportunities, obviously, to work on their cloud learning. So they're going to have to log in and do their remote learning while they're with us as well. So that's really kind of an example of what that schedule is going to look like. Amy's going to talk very briefly about where we are with technology.
And the next few slides, I'm going to go in more detail for our community webinar that's coming up. But I just wanted to make sure that you see some of the talking points we'll be talking about, which include Chromebooks are going to be available the first 2 weeks of August. As you know, Canvas is our new learning management system. And I'm going to be talking with parents and explaining some of the features of Canvas. Actually, if we could go to the next slide, please. On our district website, we now have a link to a slideshow that includes videos that really explain the features of Canvas for parents. And then we also have screenshots from examples of our professional development that we've been using this summer. Parents really shared that they would like to know a little bit more about Canvas, what it looks like, and so that will be provided. And there you go. There are some of the samples.
This time we're going to turn it over to Eric Whitney. So he's going to talk us through our return to learn plan.
Thanks, Deanna. Good morning, everybody. I would say probably if I had to rank the questions that we're getting from our staff, from teachers and other support staff, it is about safety and the protocols that we have in place. So I'm really happy to talk about that this morning. Hopefully answer some of your questions. And the first thing I really want to say is that I want to point you in the direction of two very important documents that you are going to want to get your hands on. One of them you already have. You received it last evening, I believe, which is the Return to Learn plan. I'm going to review these components today in sort of a high-level fashion because the Return to Learn plan really covers them in much more detail and also shows the progression about how we're going to treat these specific topics, whether we are in phases 1 through 3, phase 4, or phase 5 of our Return to Learn. The second document, which you will be getting via email, all of our employees will receive, is called Workplace Safeguards for Employees. And that document goes into more depth on employee kind of issues, things that maybe you're thinking about, PPE, testing, screening, all sorts of things are also included in that Workplace Safeguards for Employees. So those are two really important things we want you to take a look at, review them in depth, let us know if you have questions, but I think a lot of the things that are on your mind will be answered there. So we're going to get started with face coverings. That seems to be a very prominent question for everyone. And when you look at the Return to Learn plan, you are going to see our stance and our expectation on face coverings. So for staff, face coverings must be worn at all times, of course, except when you're eating. And again, I should back up just one little step and say our Return to Learn plan and these expectations do align with the governor's My Safe Schools. So they weren't really plucked out of thin air. They're really based on best practice and advice and guidance from that level. Face coverings must be worn in the classroom by students in grades 6 through 12. Those are required for students in grades 6 through 12. And this really is specifically, we're talking about while we're in phase 4, while we are returning to learning and starting to bring students back into the classroom. They are highly encouraged, face coverings are highly encouraged in classrooms for students in grades pre-K through 5. So they are not required, they are not mandated in the plan, but they are highly encouraged. With student face coverings, we are recommending that families provide those for their students. We think that that's really the best opportunity for them to choose something that's comfortable for their students, something they like, something they want to wear. But I know that Kyle Anderson and Ted Stinson have ordered thousands upon thousands upon thousands of disposable masks, which we will also have if a student forgot it, if a student didn't have it, et cetera, et cetera. But we really think it's important that they find something comfortable for them, that they are at ease wearing it. You know, it's not the best feeling. I know we're all kind of learning and adjusting to that. Face coverings must be worn by all students. This is in pre-K through 5 as well, when they are in hallways, when they are in common areas, and when they are interacting with students from another class. They must be worn during school transportation by all students on the bus. They'll need those to board the bus. Face coverings can be homemade or they can be disposable level 1 basic surgical masks. So homemade masks need to be laundered each day. Disposable masks need to be disposed of each day as well. So if a question that comes up often is what happens if I cannot tolerate a face mask, whether that's for a medical reason or some other specific reason, we will require documentation about that, whether that's a doctor's note, IEP information, those sorts of things. Our student code of conduct really addresses the failure to follow school rules. So this is something that teachers have asked me as well. What happens if a student refuses to wear a mask or isn't wearing one, et cetera? And we really feel that code of conduct does adequately address that. Not that we are trying to be heavy-handed with students, but it is an expectation that they will have them in those situations I just reviewed. And we are also telling people, and I know this is a little bit direct, but I think it is important to say, we will say this to our parents this evening. It is stated right in that plan this way. If you object to wearing a face covering, if that is difficult for you, then we really do believe you should consider Lakers Online as a solution to that issue, because we do have those expectations in place. In terms of hygiene, we're really talking especially about hand washing, hand sanitizer, etc. Along with ordering thousands upon thousands of masks, I know that Kyle and Ted have also been working hard to procure hand sanitizer at the correct level of effectiveness for each of our classrooms, for all of our common areas, in hallways and in offices. So those will be installed. Some of them are wall installation, I believe, and then some are pumps that can be moved, sit on desks. Oh, there they. Nice, we have the sample from Kyle, so you'll see that. We are developing hand washing signage that will be posted and visible in the school. So we are working, Dan Durkin, and we will work with our school principals to make sure that that gets put up. We are expecting that teachers will deliver some hand washing lessons as part of their classroom instruction, especially at the beginning on the first day, and then periodically as needed. Those hand washing lessons will be developed in consultation with our public health nurse resource that will be assigned to our district from the Oakland County Health Division, coming soon to a theater near you. We encourage and expect that principals and teachers will be thinking about classroom procedures that limit the sharing of supplies. So this is a departure from what you see, for example, in a lot of elementary classrooms where you have a common set of writing utensils at the group table that everybody uses. So teachers, I know between now and school, you're going to want to be thinking about what are those routines going to look like? How are they going to change in your classroom? And then students' personal items will be kept in separate containers, in their own containers, lockers or cubbies that we label with their name and should be used by those students only. The next section that you'll find in that Return to Learn plan is about spacing, movement, and access. And so I just wanted to touch on a couple of things related to that section. And again, I encourage you to read that in depth. Every effort is going to be made to keep students spaced apart and facing forward in the classrooms, but you know that our classrooms are all different sizes, and that will certainly be a factor in determining how many students we schedule in our classes, and what that looks like, and what we are actually able to do in terms of spacing. We have different, our furniture is really tables, so not so much desks, although in some places we do. So we will be working with that different configurations to make sure that we follow those recommendations. We are asking teachers to maintain 6, this is not normal, I know, for teachers, especially like in your training, when you're dealing with classroom management, they teach you proximity to students, and those are techniques that you're very much used to doing. So it feels very strange sometimes for us to be making these recommendations that really run counter to everything we've ever worked with teachers on and are ever done as teachers ourselves. So we're asking you to maintain 6 feet of spacing between yourselves and students as much as possible. We will be providing in our classrooms, in our special education classrooms, for our people like speech therapists and so on, partitions or clear barriers that you can move within your classroom. They are movable, they're not installed permanently. Those are going to be provided so that you can continue to work with small groups of students and or individual students in your setting and have that barrier that you need between you. We are very much restricting visitor access to schools. So we'd like to say none, but we know that there are going to be times when parents need to come into school to drop things off, etc. We are really asking them to handle as much of their business with the school via phone and email. In that instance where they may need to come to school, they will only be permitted into the main office. And there are specific protocols around visitors that they must follow. They have to wash their hands as soon as they enter. They have to wear a mask. They will be screened for symptoms of COVID and exposure to COVID-19. And they will also have to register their contact information should we need that. We are not allowing visitors to classrooms. So when those visitors come, they may only go so far as the main office. And that's it. So please, as you're thinking about your classrooms this fall, while we are in phase 4, please, don't be planning for classroom volunteers, mother helper type situations that you are really used to doing. In terms of screening and testing, of course, it is important to note that we really take our advice on screening and testing, our guidance and our direction from public health officials. And so that's really important to know. And that advice and direction does change from time to time. So what is published today in this document could evolve as our public health officials recommend different things. Some important things to know is that we will be establishing in every school building an isolation area. That isolation area should have a door that closes. It should be away from people if it can be. And that is a place for students or staff members, if it came to that, who become ill, they will be placed in that isolation area until they can be picked up with a mask. There are some more in-depth protocols that you will read in that plan. All employees entering the workplace are required to complete a daily entry self-screening protocol. So it's very similar to the questions that you are asked now when you work in person, that screening protocol. We will be updating that a little bit, and we'll be asking you to also self-report your temperature as part of that. And at this time, this is a question I also get: are we requiring, all staff, for example, to have a negative COVID test before they work in person? And so you will read, if you read in the governor's plan, at this time, testing of all students and staff members is not recommended. So we will not be requiring that. Testing is only recommended for individuals that develop symptoms or potentially have exposure to COVID-19. Responding to a positive test, of course, again, we take the direction if somebody does test positive, a student or a staff member, from the health department. Health officials, staff, and families will be notified of any possible case of COVID in the class or the school. Of course, I always remind everyone that we must adhere to the rules of confidentiality, but that will happen very similarly to other communicable disease reporting that we do in schools right now. So you can expect that. And the Oakland County Health Division is really the entity that will be responsible for that contact tracing. They will rely on us probably to a great extent, but we do not initiate how far that goes or what happens in those protocols. That will really come from the health division. So we, of course, will cooperate with that. That's why we want to make sure that we have good contact information for all those individuals that are in our buildings. And you will see when you read the workplace safeguards that there is a specific protocol for reporting a positive COVID-19 test. So if you get a test and you test positive, or a student or a family does, that should be reported to the building administrator, and the administrator will report that to my office, and we will coordinate that reporting to the Oakland County Health Division. There's specific information that has to be gathered and so on. So there's a lot there and a lot to be done, but hopefully take some time to read both of those documents. We'll be sending out the employee workplace safeguards a little bit later this week. All right, I'm passing it on to Kyle Anderson, who's going to take the ball and run to the finish line, I think.
Yes, thank you, Eric. And when we say the word operations in a school district, that really means that food service department, transportation, and our maintenance and custodial departments. And I want a quick shout out to contributors on our task force: Ann Stevens, our food service director; Lynn Robertson, our transportation director; and Ted Stinson is our director of facilities. We have been meeting at a minimum weekly since the beginning of summer. And we really resolved in our meetings to focus on positive outcomes. Our job is really simply to support instruction and everything that goes on in classrooms. So we focused on resolving issues, and we didn't let our meetings degrade to commiseration and not being able to solve these problems. So I want to thank those three in particular for all their hard work. Our plans, as Mr. Whitney stated, really aligned with the governor's roadmap, but also the six-phased approach to reopening the state. So, I'll talk a little bit about food service first, but in phases 1 through 3, we are closed for in-person instruction. So similar to what we did in the spring, this past school year, we would have meals available for pickup for students if we are in phases 1 through 3. In phase 4, which is our current phase that we're in right now, and hopefully we don't go backwards, we have specific protocols in that return to learn plan that you can read in much more detail. But essentially, in food service, one of the nice things that we have, all of our food service employees go through what's called a Serve Safe certification. So there are a number of food prep safeties that are already in place regardless of COVID. But with this plan, there are additional safety protocols that we have in place. And those include wearing face coverings and gloves and continually washing your hands. Any meals that are served will be individually packaged. We're not going to share any utensils or anything like that to keep that stuff separate from students. We are really encouraging the use of prepaid meal accounts. So we're trying to limit the exchange of bills and coins. And one thing we did was remove that transaction fee that families see when they load those prepaid meal accounts. So we're hoping that goes a long way in encouraging that use. And of course, we have Lakers Online and in phase 4 of the high school. So we will have meals available for all of our online learners. So next slide is phase 5. We're open for in-person instruction. And really all of the safety precautions in phase 4 continue into phase 5. We will have protective barriers in place, and many of them are already there. You've been to buffets and in our lunch lines, they're called sneeze guards. But if we have to add any additional barriers, we will certainly do that. And we will stagger meal times if we're able to use the cafeterias and make sure we're able to social distance students during those times. And also phase 5, we will have meals available for online learners. So I want to transition to transportation. And what we're doing this year, and really we talked about doing this regardless of this pandemic, but do an opt-in system for families. One of the requirements in the governor's plan is for social distancing, and that means that really the space or capacity, I should say, on a bus is limited. So we have 2 basic models of a school bus. One that in ideal world is rated to carry 77 passengers, and to accommodate spacing requirements, that capacity is about 26 students. We also have 65 passenger buses that would accommodate about 22 students. Of course, siblings would be sitting together, and we plan to have assigned seating on those buses as we transport students to and from schools. So we are asking families to complete this online opt-in registration form by July 31st. And we will be sure, working with Dan Durkin, to get that information out repeatedly so we can get that information to continue our routing plans. And then in phase 1 through 3, transportation really is a non-issue because we're not in-person instruction. So in phase 4 in transportation, to talk about some of the safety protocols on a school bus, face coverings will be worn by all staff, and the governor's plan requires that all students wear a face covering while on a school bus. We have clearance from the state police. That's the department that checks the safety and maintenance of all of our school buses. We have clearance to install a hand sanitizing device. So as students enter the bus, they're required to use it. We have a protocol in place where buses will be disinfected after every route, and we're using an EPA approved disinfectant. To continue with transportation, we're also going to utilize a device, a spray mister, that will shoot spray particles of disinfectant and cover all of the surfaces. We're going to do that each morning and before each afternoon route. And that really is for timing and efficiency to get that process done efficiently. And of course, in phase 5, we are moving towards normalcy, and we're open for in-person instruction. And we would then go back to our original bell times that we kind of talked about earlier in the presentation. So probably one of the most, I guess, important aspects of this plan, and probably one that we receive a lot of questions on, is really this cleaning and disinfecting aspect of our plan. And in the governor's plan, we were really quite relieved when we received the governor's roadmap, because it gave us an opportunity to put concrete plans in place. And one of the requirements is to disinfect frequently high-touched areas every 4 hours. And although this was not a driver in the decision to move to half days, it did fit nicely because there's approximately an hour and a half between the AM and PM sessions that we can accomplish this task. We will also clean playgrounds in both phases once per day, playground equipment. And we're really working with our partner at DMBER to kind of change their contractual requirements. And we want the school district to be more involved in the recruitment and placing of staff members. So we want to ensure that all of our custodians are the highest of quality, so we can make sure our staff and our students are safe. And that also includes a very rigorous training protocol using EPA and C2C guidance. For example, one of those small points to that is there's a difference between sanitizing and disinfecting. And our custodians need to understand the difference. So sanitizing really lowers the number of germs and pathogens on a surface, whereas disinfecting kills germs, bacteria, and COVID viruses on surfaces. So it's important that our custodians understand that and are trained on how to use the products that we will have in place. So we will have a number of visual aids and job cards so we can really check and make sure that all of these tasks are being performed at the appropriate times, and all the protocols are being followed with our custodial staff. And to continue here, we also have the use of this spray misting device that we will be using in our classrooms. Deanna had mentioned the Wednesday deep clean. This is an opportunity for us to use this device. It really needs to be done when students and staff are not in the buildings. And staff will be trained on how to use it. And it's very efficient. It takes about a minute to hit a classroom, and then we can move on, and that classroom is then safe. We'll also be, Eric talked about this a little bit, providing physical barriers where physical distancing is difficult. That includes office areas, and each of our elementary teachers will have one for, as he mentioned, that one-on-one work with students. So, I don't know, Deanna, I don't know if you want to hit the final thoughts or if you want me to hit this.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quickly because we have families coming online in just 7 minutes, and I'm sure they're probably anxiously waiting for us to open the webinar so they can listen in. So just some final thoughts. We're going to continue to monitor the governor's communication, and we'll have to adjust our plans accordingly. So if there's a shift in the phases, then we will have to make that shift as well. So please continue to I know it's summer, but checking your email, reaching out to us, getting online and getting the latest information is really vitally important right now, because things do continue to evolve and change almost daily. So we really need you to stay engaged. Please look for weekly updates from us, as well as from your buildings, as we continue to really fine tune these plans, think about how we cohort students, develop these transportation systems, how are we going to move kids in and out of the building. So you'll see communications from your buildings and from us on weekly. So please make sure you check those. Don't hesitate to ask your questions. You might have noticed that we turned the Q&A off today, because often what we found is that we are answering the questions within the presentation, and or you miss some important details because you're busy worrying about whether or not we're going to answer the question. And so we will be sending a link to you later today to a Google form. You can submit your questions there based upon what you heard today. And so we will get that, Dan will get that out to you later this morning. We wanted you to hear the presentation before we set that follow-up questions. And of course, you can always go to Kim and ask, and so far she and Eric and I have been meeting on a weekly basis at least, and so are in constant communication. So that also is another avenue for you as well. And please know that in all of our plans, regardless of the shifts we've had to make, the additional information we've had to glean from all of you, that we want to do what's best for our students and for our staff. We see the information that's out there about districts that are returning 5 days, or districts that haven't sought staff input, or that haven't gone to their families and garnered their kind of thoughts about what the fall should look like. We've tried to communicate. We've tried to make sure that you're involved in the decision making. I can't guarantee you that we're meeting every specific person's needs and questions and exactly what you want, but we certainly are taking into consideration all of your thoughts, and we spend a lot of hours thinking about it and trying to always do what's best for our students and staff. Again, our goal is the same. We want high quality instruction. We want students in school, but we want to do it as safely as we possibly can under this current situation. How we get there may change along the way, but that is our end goal. So thank you for coming today and spending some time with us. We will share this presentation with all of you. We have recorded it, so we'll send it out. Kim has a copy of the actual presentation as well. We'll make sure that you get a copy of it too, so you can go back and refer to it. We appreciate all you do and continue to do for our students and staff in West Bloomfield. Have a great rest of your day.